Master Chef Gray stood motionless in the pristine kitchen of the Galactic Culinary Institute, staring at the holographic recipe floating before them. Another perfectly calculated dish. Protein strands arranged in mathematically pleasing patterns, nutrients balanced to 6 decimal places, flavors calibrated to meet the exact specifications of modern galactic taste. And they hated every bit of it. 200 years of cooking the same scientifically perfect meals had slowly drained their passion. Gray's 4-fingered hand reached up to adjust their chef's collar, a gesture that had become a nervous habit over the centuries. The prestigious kitchen around them hummed with the sound of automated cooking units and precision molecular assemblers. "Master Chef, your presence is required in Teaching Lab 3, announced the kitchen's eye. "Student inspection in 5 minutes." Gray sighed and walked through the gleaming corridors, their footsteps echoing against the sterile white walls. Every surface sparkled with an unnatural cleanliness that had become the standard in modern galactic society. Even the air was filtered to remove any trace of actual cooking smells, deemed too primitive and potentially distracting for the students. The teaching lab was filled with young alien chefs from across the galaxy, each standing at their own cooking station. Gray began their usual inspection, checking each student's work with their scanner. Perfect nutritional balance, perfect temperature control, perfect portion sizes, all exactly the same, all exactly wrong. Then they smelled something forbidden. Gray's sensitive nose twitched. Among the sterile, controlled aromas of the lab, there was a hint of something. Warm, sweet. The smell was coming from a small storage unit at Student Mark's station. "Student Mark," Gray said, their voice stern. "Open your personal storage unit." The young alien's skin shifted to a pale green, a clear sign of nervousness in their species. With trembling hands, Mark opened the unit. Inside was a small, brown, circular object wrapped in simple paper. "Explain," Gray demanded, though their hearts were racing with curiosity. It's a cookie, Master Chef," Mark whispered. "From Earth. My cousin brought it back as a souvenir. I know it's against regulations to have unregistered food items, but Earth." Gray had heard of the planet. A primitive world, barely space-capable, known for its chaotic and uncontrolled approach to everything, including food. "This is a serious violation. Hand it over." Mark surrendered the cookie, their antenna drooping in shame. Gray should have disposed of it immediately, should have reported the violation. Instead, they found themselves saying, "Class dismissed. Student Mark, see me tomorrow about your punishment." The students filed out quickly, leaving Gray alone with the contraband. They studied the simple object. No nutritional information, no ingredient ratios, just a rough circle of brown material with darker spots scattered through it. How could anyone eat something so imprecise? With a quick glance at the door, Gray broke off a small piece. The scanner would alert security if they consumed unauthorized food, so they disabled it. Another serious violation. Then, for the first time in their career, they broke the most sacred rule of modern galactic cooking. They tasted food without analyzing it first. The sensation was overwhelming. Sweetness, but not the calculated sweetness of their normal dishes. This was wild, uncontrolled. The texture was both crisp and soft, a contradiction that would never pass modern cooking standards. And those dark spots, they melted, creating bursts of rich flavor that made Gray's taste buds tingle. For several minutes, Gray stood there, experiencing actual pleasure from food for the first time in their long life. Everything they knew about cooking, every rule and formula they'd learned, suddenly felt empty. That evening, instead of filing their usual reports, Gray sat in their private quarters, staring at the remaining piece of the cookie. Their centuries-old certainty had crumbled like the earth snack in their hands. A dangerous thought began to form in their mind, one that would change their life forever. Perhaps perfection wasn't perfect after all. Gray couldn't sleep. For the third night in a row, they sat hunched over their data pad in their dimly lit quarters, reading everything they could find about Earth food. Their normal daily routines at the Galactic Culinary Institute had become almost impossible to focus on. "Computer, show me more about this concept of comfort food," Gray whispered, afraid someone might hear them researching such primitive cooking concepts. The computer displayed images of steaming bowls of soup, fresh baked bread, and something called mac and cheese. None of it made sense by galactic standards. These foods weren't nutritionally complete. The portions weren't standardized. The temperatures varied wildly. Yet the more Gray learned, the more fascinated they became. They found themselves secretly watching old Earth cooking videos during their breaks. One particular phrase kept appearing: cooking with love. Gray had never encountered such an illogical concept. How could emotions affect food preparation? The idea was absurd, yet that cookie had tasted like more than just ingredients. During a mandatory staff meeting, Gray barely heard the institute director droning on about new nutritional guidelines. Instead, their mind wandered to the Earth video they'd watched earlier about something called street food. Humans actually cooked in the open air, with fire and smoke, letting random particles enter their food. "Master Chef Gray," the director's voice snapped them back to reality. "Your thoughts on the new protein synthesis protocols?" "Oh, yes, of course." Gray stumbled over their words. "Very efficient." After the meeting, Gray rushed back to their research. They discovered that Earth had thousands of different cooking styles called cuisines. Each region of the tiny planet had developed its own unique ways of preparing food. Some deliberately burned their ingredients for flavor. Others fermented foods for months or years. Some even ate completely raw ingredients. The more they learned, the more their view of cooking changed. Gray began to see their own perfectly calibrated dishes as somehow lifeless, empty, too clean. Late one night, Gray did something that shocked even themselves. They secretly ordered a cooking tool from Earth, a simple metal pan. When it arrived, they smuggled it into their private kitchen. The weight of it felt strange, primitive, exciting. Following a basic Earth recipe, they attempted to recreate the chocolate chip cookie that had started all this. The first batch burned. The second was raw in the middle. The third was oddly shaped and completely non-uniform. They were the most beautiful things Gray had ever made. Walking through the institute the next day, Gray looked at their fellow chefs differently. Everyone following the same recipes, making the same perfect, soulless food. Had they all forgotten that food could be more than just fuel? During an advanced cooking class, one of Gray's best students presented a flawless molecular gastronomy creation. Every element was precisely measured, every flavor scientifically balanced. Gray should have been proud. Instead, they asked, "But how does it make you feel?" The students stared at them in confusion. "Feel, Master Chef." That was the moment Gray knew they couldn't continue. 200 years of reputation, their prestigious position, their place in galactic society. None of it mattered anymore. They had tasted real food, and there was no going back. That evening, Gray wrote 2 messages. The first was their resignation from the Galactic Culinary Institute, effective immediately. The second was an application for an Earth travel visa. As they sent the messages, their hands shook. Somewhere on that primitive planet, humans were cooking meals without measuring tools, using ancient techniques passed down through generations, creating food that made people happy. Gray needed to understand how. They needed to learn everything about this chaotic, imperfect, wonderful way of cooking. They needed to go to Earth. The spaceport terminal buzzed with activity as Gray stood in line at the travel agency. Other aliens stared at them. It wasn't every day they saw a former master chef of the Galactic Culinary Institute in public, especially not buying a ticket to Earth. "You want to go where?" the travel agent asked, all 3 of her eyes blinking in surprise. "Earth? But that's a primitive destination." Gray nodded firmly. "Yes. One-way ticket, please. One way." The agent lowered her voice. "Sir, are you being threatened? Blink twice if you need security." "Just the ticket, please," Gray insisted, pushing their credit chip across the counter. Their restaurant had sold for a good price. Apparently, many chefs wanted to buy a former master chef's establishment. If they only knew Gray was using the money to chase primitive cooking. The passenger ship was huge but basic by galactic standards. Gray's cabin was small, with just enough room for their few belongings and the secret Earth cooking pan they'd smuggled along. They had also packed the data pad containing their Earth food research, though they'd had to delete most of the cooking videos to avoid suspicion. As the ship departed, Gray watched their homeworld shrink away through the viewport. 200 years of perfect cooking, gone. Their reputation, their status, their entire life, all abandoned for the taste of a cookie. "Attention passengers," the ship's AI announced. "The dining hall is now open. Today's menu features precisely balanced nutrient portions according to galactic standard." Gray sighed and headed to the ship's kitchen instead of the dining hall. They had gained special permission to use it, though the staff couldn't understand why a former master chef would want to cook manually. The kitchen was empty when they arrived. Perfect. Gray pulled out their Earth pan and some basic ingredients they'd brought along. Time to practice. The first few attempts at Earth cooking during the journey were disasters. Gray burned 3 meals and somehow managed to make one explode slightly. But they kept trying, following the basic recipes they'd memorized. Other passengers began to notice the strange smells coming from the kitchen. Most wrinkled their noses in disgust, but a few showed curiosity. "What is that aroma?" asked one passenger, peering into the kitchen during Gray's 5th attempt at making pasta. "It's called garlic," Gray explained, stirring the pot carefully. "Humans use it for flavor." "Flavor? You mean beyond the standard taste profiles?" Soon, Gray had a small audience. Most came to watch out of horror or amusement, but a few brave souls actually requested tastes of the strange Earth foods. "This is different," said a young alien, trying Gray's attempt at a simple Earth breakfast. "It's not perfectly balanced at all. But I keep wanting more." Is this what humans call cravings? The ship's 3-month journey gave Gray plenty of time to practice. Each day, they got a little better at controlling the heat, at seasoning by feel, at understanding what humans meant by phrases like, "until it looks done." But it also made them more certain of their decision. The more they cooked Earth food, the more they realized how much they still had to learn. The ship's captain visited the kitchen on the final day of the journey. "We're approaching Earth orbit," he said, watching Gray clean their pan. "Last chance to change your mind. We could turn around, pretend this whole thing never happened. Your position at the Institute probably hasn't been filled yet." Gray looked at the simple Earth pan in their hands, then at the captain. "No," they said firmly. "I need to know more. All our advanced technology, all our perfect measurements. Somehow humans created something better with just fire and instinct. I have to understand how." The captain shook his head and left. Through the kitchen viewport, a blue-green planet came into view. Earth. Gray's new life was about to begin. Gray stepped off the shuttle into the small Earth town of Rivers Bend, chosen specifically for its reputation for good food. The air hit them first, thick with 1,000 different smells that their enhanced alien senses could barely process. Cooking smoke, fresh bread, grilled meat, vehicle exhaust, and something sweet and floral all mixed together. They sneezed 3 times in quick succession. "You okay there, friend?" asked the shuttle driver, a friendly human who hadn't even blinked at picking up an alien passenger. "Air's a bit different here than up in those clean space stations, eh?" Gray nodded, still trying to adjust. Their research hadn't prepared them for how overwhelming Earth would be. Everything was so messy, uncontrolled, alive. Following their carefully prepared map, Gray walked down the main street. Their hearts beat faster with each new discovery. A door opened, releasing a burst of coffee smell. A street vendor was cooking something called hot dogs on a small metal cart. Every restaurant they passed added new layers to the symphony of scents. They stopped in front of a building with large windows. Inside, humans were eating something that steamed in large bowls. The sign read Tom's Noodle House, best ramen in town. Gray checked their translation device 3 times, but still couldn't understand how anyone could claim to have the best version of a dish. Wouldn't all properly prepared versions be identical? Want to try some? A young human stood in the doorway, wiping her hands on an apron. We just opened for lunch. Gray hesitated. They had planned to start with simpler earth foods, but yes, please. The inside was warm and noisy. Conversations overlapped, dishes clinked, and something sizzled loudly in the kitchen. Gray was seated at a counter where they could watch the cooks work. "First time trying ramen?" the server asked. Gray nodded. "Then you've got to try Tom's special. Extra spicy." Spicy? Gray had read about this concept but hadn't experienced it. Before they could object, a huge bowl was placed in front of them. Steam rose from the red-tinted broth, carrying an aroma that made their nose tingle. They watched other humans eating and copied their technique with the wooden sticks called chopsticks. The first bite changed everything. Heat exploded across their tongue. Their enhanced alien taste buds screamed in shock. Tears formed in all 4 of their eyes. They grabbed their water glass and drank it empty. "Too spicy?" the server asked, looking concerned. "No," Gray gasped, already reaching for another bite. "It's amazing." It hurt. It burned. It was completely contrary to every principle of galactic cuisine, and it was the most incredible thing they had ever tasted. They ate the entire bowl, though their face had turned a bright shade of purple, the alien equivalent of a flushed face. The flavors were so complex, so varied, that their advanced sense of taste picked up dozens of different notes in each spoonful. "You handled that pretty well for your first time," the server said, refilling their water glass for the 6th time. "Most aliens can't handle Tom's special. There are other aliens who eat here. Oh sure, we get a few tourists. They usually stick to the mild stuff though. Never seen one order the special before." Gray looked around the restaurant with new eyes. This wasn't just a place to consume nutrients. People were smiling, laughing, sharing bites from each other's bowls. A child at a nearby table made happy sounds while slurping noodles messily. They thought about the sterile dining halls back home, where meals were consumed in efficient silence. No one there had ever made happy sounds about food. That evening, Gray sat in their small rented room, their tongues still tingling pleasantly. They had tasted one dish in one restaurant in one small Earth town. How much more was there to discover? They fell asleep dreaming of spices and steam, their old life of precise measurements feeling more distant with each passing moment. After a week of eating at every restaurant in Rivers Bend, Gray knew they needed to do more than just taste Earth food. They needed to learn how to make it. With their savings running low, they started looking for work in local kitchens. "Dishwasher wanted," read the sign in the window of Pete's Family Diner. Gray had to check their translator twice. Someone whose only job was to wash dishes. In galactic restaurants, cleaning was fully automated. The owner, Pete, was a large man with gray hair and kind eyes. He didn't even blink at having an alien in his kitchen. "Ever washed dishes before?" "No," Gray admitted, "but I learned quickly." "Former chef, huh?" Pete said, looking at Gray's job history. "Pretty fancy space cooking school you got here. So, why do you want to wash dishes?" Gray thought carefully before answering. "Because I need to learn how real food is made. From the beginning." Pete smiled. "Well, that's the first smart thing I've heard from a fancy chef. You're hired." The work was hard. Gray's hands weren't made for hot water and soap, but they didn't complain. From their spot at the sink, they could watch the kitchen staff work. It was nothing like the kitchens they were used to. The head cook was an older woman named Rose who never measured anything. She would grab spices and throw them in by the handful, adjust heat by looking at the flame, and test doneness by poking things with her fingers. "How do you know how much to use?" Gray asked one day, watching her season a pot of soup. You just know, Rose said, stirring the pot. Come here and smell. Gray leaned over the pot, their sensitive nose taking in the aroma. Now what's missing? Rose asked. I don't know. I don't have the recipe data. Rose laughed. Don't use your head, use your nose. What does it need? Gray sniffed again, thinking about all the earth foods they tasted. Salt. See, you can learn. Slowly, between loads of dishes, Gray began to understand. They learned that vegetables cooked differently depending on how they were cut. They discovered that the same ingredients could taste completely different based on how they were prepared. They started to recognize the smell of food that was about to burn. One quiet afternoon, Rose was teaching Gray how to make a simple vegetable soup. Add a pinch of salt, she instructed. But what's a pinch? Here, like this. Rose demonstrated with her fingers. But that's not precise. How can you ensure consistency? Honey, Rose said patiently, food isn't about being consistent. It's about making something that tastes good right now, for the people you're feeding right now. This concept puzzled Gray more than anything else. Back home, every meal was exactly the same, every time. But here, Rose's soups tasted slightly different each day, and customers actually seemed to like that. Today's soup is even better than yesterday, they would say. Made with extra love today, Rose would answer with a wink. After a month, Gray had graduated from just washing dishes to helping with basic prep work. Their knife skills were excellent. Some habits from their master chef days were actually useful, but they struggled with the human concept of eyeballing it. You don't need to measure every single green bean to the same length, Rose would say, watching Gray meticulously cut vegetables. They'll cook just fine if they're a little different. One day, while drying dishes, Gray overheard a customer praising Rose's cooking. How do you make it taste like home? The customer asked. That's the secret, Rose replied. You don't just cook the food. You cook the feeling you want to share. Gray dried the same plate 3 times, thinking about this. In all their centuries of cooking, they had never once considered what feeling they wanted to share through their food. They still had so much to learn. 6 months into their job at Pete's Family Diner, Gray did something that would change everything. It happened during the lunch rush when Rose called in sick. The diner was short-staffed, and the orders were piling up. I can cook, Gray offered quietly to Pete, who was frantically working the grill. Pete looked desperate enough to try anything. You know Rose's recipes. Yes, Gray said, but I'd like to try something different. Maybe it was the stress of the lunch rush, or maybe Pete saw something in Gray's 4 eyes, but he nodded. Kitchen's yours. Gray had been thinking about this for weeks. Their alien sense of taste and smell, combined with everything they'd learned about earth cooking, had given them an idea. They started pulling ingredients from the shelves, their 4 hands moving quickly. What are you making? Pete asked, watching Gray work. Earth food, Gray replied, but with some improvements. They created something that looked like a normal hamburger, but they had infused the meat with a careful blend of spices that would activate different taste buds in sequence. They added layers of texture that complemented each other in ways their galactic training had taught them. But most importantly, they cooked it the way Rose had taught them, with feeling. The first customer to try it went silent for a full minute after taking a bite. I've never. The customer couldn't find the words. Can I order 3 more to go? By the end of the lunch rush, word had spread. People were calling their friends. The line stretched out the door. Everyone wanted to try the alien burger. A food blogger happened to be in town that day. She posted pictures online, calling it a perfect blend of earth comfort food and alien precision, the future of fusion cuisine. The post went viral. Within a week, the first alien tourists arrived. They came expecting to mock the primitive earth food. Instead, they found themselves ordering seconds, then thirds. Gray's cooking showed them how amazing food could be when precision and passion worked together. You've mixed the ratios of salt and fat to stimulate exactly the right pleasure receptors, one alien food critic noted, but it still has that mysterious earth food quality. That soul. Pete had to hire more staff to handle the crowds. He gave Gray a raise and their own section of the kitchen. Soon, they were creating new dishes, galactic-style tacos that changed flavor with each bite, mathematically perfect pizzas with toppings arranged for maximum taste bud stimulation, desserts that used alien cooking techniques to enhance simple Earth ingredients. Other aliens began visiting Earth specifically to try Gray's food. Some were former colleagues from the Galactic Culinary Institute, coming to see if the rumors were true. Many arrived skeptical, but left converted. "I never knew food could be like this," a young alien chef told Gray. "All my training said that perfect food had to be perfectly consistent. But this is something else." Gray understood. They had felt the same way about that first cookie. Food critics from across the galaxy wrote about the revolution happening in a small Earth diner. They called it postmodern fusion cuisine, or transgalactic culinary art. But Gray just called it cooking. The Galactic Culinary Institute sent a formal delegation to study this new cooking style. They arrived in their pristine white uniforms, carrying their precision instruments. "Explain your methodology," they demanded. Gray led them into the kitchen. First, they said, picking up a wooden spoon the way Rose had taught them, "You have to understand that perfect food isn't about being perfect." The delegation looked confused. "Here," Gray said, handing them each a chocolate chip cookie, the first Earth food they had ever tasted. "Start with this." As they watched their former colleagues experience the same revelation they had, Gray felt something they had never felt in their 200 years of galactic cooking. They felt proud, not of their precision or their measurements or their technique, but of the joy their food brought to others, human and alien alike. 1 year after Gray's first taste of Earth food, they stood in front of their own restaurant. The sign read "Home Cooking from Far Away" in both English and Standard Galactic. It was a small place, just down the street from Pete's Diner, where they still helped out on busy days. Inside, the kitchen was a curious mix of Earth and alien technology. Traditional wood-burning stoves stood next to molecular analyzers. Ancient cast iron pans hung beside quantum heat distributors. But the most important tool was still that first Earth pan Gray had smuggled from home. "Teacher Gray." A young voice interrupted their morning prep work. It was their newest student, a young alien chef named Blue who had quit the Galactic Culinary Institute to learn Earth cooking. "The cookies aren't coming out right," Blue said, holding up a tray of misshapen chocolate chip cookies. "I followed the measurements exactly, but they don't taste like yours." Gray smiled, remembering their own early struggles. "Show me how you're making them." Blue demonstrated their technique, measuring each ingredient with scientific precision, carefully timing each step. Everything was technically perfect. "Ah," Gray said, "there's your problem. You're cooking like an alien." "But I am an alien. Watch." Gray put aside the measuring tools and started mixing ingredients by feel, the way Rose had taught them. "See how the dough looks. That's what you want. Not what the numbers tell you, but what your eyes and hands tell you." "But how can you be sure it's right?" "You can't," Gray said. "That's what makes it special." The restaurant began filling up with the usual mix of humans and aliens. Some came for Gray's innovative fusion dishes, others for their traditional Earth recipes. But everyone got the same thing: food cooked with both precision and love. A familiar face walked in. The young human server from Tom's Noodle House who had first served Gray's spicy ramen. She was now a regular customer. "The usual?" Gray asked. "Actually," she said, "I brought someone who wanted to meet you." She stepped aside, revealing Rose, who had retired from Pete's Diner months ago. "Had to see how my star dishwasher was doing," Rose said with a smile. Gray quickly prepared their special dish for Rose, a bowl of soup that looked simple but used alien techniques to enhance the flavors Rose had taught them to create. They watched nervously as she tasted it. Rose's eyes widened. It tastes like my grandmother's soup, but somehow even more like home than I remember. You taught me that food should share a feeling, Gray said. I just found a way to make that feeling stronger. Later that evening, after the restaurant had closed, Gray taught their last class of the day. The students were a mix of humans and aliens, all wanting to learn how to bridge the gap between their different cooking styles. Today, we're starting with the basics, Gray announced, pulling out ingredients for chocolate chip cookies. These are what taught me that imperfection can be perfect. As they demonstrated the recipe, Gray watched their students' faces. The aliens were shocked by the loose measurements, while the humans were fascinated by the alien techniques for enhancing flavors. But they were all learning from each other, creating something new together. That night, as Gray cleaned their beloved earth pan, they thought about how far they had come. They had left their homeworld looking for something they couldn't name, and found it in the most unexpected places, in Rose's patient teachings, in Pete's trust, in their students' discoveries. They picked up a cookie from the day's batch. It wasn't perfectly round. The chocolate chips weren't evenly distributed. By galactic standards, it was a failure. But as they took a bite, tasting the warmth and sweetness that had changed their life, Gray knew it was exactly right. Sometimes the most important measurements were the ones you couldn't measure at all.